My name is Eva Monroe, and 9 years ago, I sold one night of my life to save my dying mother, only to discover later that night gave me a son. I raised him in secret, built a life from silence and sacrifice. But the past has wings, and one day it came flying back in the form of the billionaire who unknowingly fathered my child.
Before I share the full story, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to choose family over everything.
The snow fell like ashes that Christmas Eve in Denver, each flake a tiny funeral for the life I thought I'd have. I stood outside the hospital, my mother's test results crumpled in my coat pocket. Stage 4, leukemia. The words had hit me like shrapnel, each syllable tearing through everything I thought I knew about fairness, about God, about how hard work was supposed to save you. Insurance denied, the billing clerk had said, not even looking up from her screen. Insufficient proof of residency status. My mother had lived in this country for 30 years. She'd raised me alone after Dad left, cleaned offices at night so I could go to art school. Now she lay dying 3 floors up, and some algorithm had decided her life wasn't worth saving. I pushed through the revolving door of the coffee shop where I worked, my fingers too numb to feel the handle. The Christmas decorations looked obscene, all that forced cheer while my world crumbled. I moved through my shift like a ghost, pulling shots and steaming milk while my mind calculated impossible math. Treatment costs $300,000. My savings, $847. Time until treatment needed to start, 2 weeks. You look like death, Marcus said, sliding past me to grab the soy milk. My coworker meant it kindly, but I wanted to laugh. Death was upstairs in room 314, wearing my mother's face. The bell chimed, and Silas Hamilton walked in. I'd been serving him the same black coffee for 3 months, 7:15 a.m. sharp, no sugar, no small talk. He was the kind of customer you noticed but never really saw. Expensive coat, sharp jaw, eyes that looked through you rather than at you. Tonight, though, he was here at closing time, snow in his dark hair. We're about to close, I said, already reaching for the coffee pot out of habit. I know. He sat at the counter, something different in his posture. I heard about your mother. My hand froze. How did you... I own the building her doctor practices in. Word travels. He studied me with those gray eyes, and for the first time, I felt seen. Not in a good way. How much do you need? Pride made me straighten my spine. I'm not looking for charity. I'm not offering it. The words hung between us like a blade. I understood before he said anything else. Maybe it was the way his fingers drummed against the counter, or how he couldn't quite meet my eyes now. Men like him didn't stumble over words unless they were about to say something that mattered. One night, he said quietly, I'll cover everything. Treatment, aftercare, whatever she needs. In exchange for one night. The coffee pot slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. Brown liquid spread like blood across the white tiles. Neither of us moved. You're serious. It wasn't a question. Deadly. I knelt to clean the mess, needing something to do with my hands while my mind reeled. Glass crunched under my knees. Through the window, I could see the hospital, lit up like a constellation of other people's tragedies. Why? The word came out raw. Does it matter? It should have. Everything in me screamed that it should matter. But upstairs, machines were keeping my mother alive, and Medicare had decided she wasn't worth the electricity. I need to think, I said. He stood, pulling out a business card. His personal number was handwritten on the back. You have until tomorrow night. After that, I withdraw the offer. The bell chimed again as he left. I stayed on my knees, picking up glass shards until my manager told me to go home. But I didn't have a home anymore. Just a 1-bedroom apartment where my mother's medications covered every surface, where her paintings gathered dust because her hands shook too much to hold a brush. I spent that night by her bedside. She was awake, but fading, her skin the color of old paper. Eva, baby, she whispered. You look tired. I'm fine, Mom. Her hand found mine. Bird bones wrapped in tissue paper. I'm not afraid, you know. I've had a good life. I got to see you grow up. Stop talking like that. Someone needs to. She squeezed weakly. Don't waste your life trying to save mine. But that's exactly what I did. The next night, I called Silas Hamilton. He sent a car. Of course he did. The hotel was the kind of place I'd only seen in movies, all marble and soft lighting. He was waiting in the penthouse suite, looking smaller somehow without his coat, more human. "Drink?" he offered. "Just get it over with." Something flickered across his face. Disappointment? "That's not how this works." "Then how does it work?" I was shaking now, anger and fear and desperation all tangled together. I don't know how to be a prostitute." "You're not." He poured himself whiskey, hand trembling slightly. "You're a daughter trying to save her mother. There's nothing shameful in that." "Then what are you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Someone who understands desperate choices." We sat on opposite ends of an enormous couch, the city lights painting shadows on the walls. He told me about his sister then, Emma, dead at 17 from the same disease eating my mother alive. How his father had all the money in the world but refused to pay for experimental treatment, calling it throwing good money after bad. "I watched her die by degrees," he said. "Watched her hair fall out in clumps. Watched her forget my name. Watched my father step over her to get to his golf clubs." The test turned positive on a rainy Tuesday in February. 2 pink lines, like a math equation I couldn't solve. I sat on my bathroom floor for an hour, the tile cold against my legs, trying to make sense of what those lines meant. My mother was getting better. The treatment Silas had paid for was working, her white cell count improving, color returning to her cheeks. Just yesterday, she'd felt strong enough to pick up a paintbrush. I'd found her at her easel, working on a landscape of the mountains we used to hike when I was little. "Look, Eva," she'd said, "I can finally hold the brush steady." Now I held a different kind of truth in my hands, one that would shake everything apart again. I never contacted Silas. What would I say? That our one night, which hadn't been what either of us expected, full of strange tenderness and shared grief instead of transaction, had consequences? That while he'd saved my mother's life, he'd also created a new one? The money had appeared in the hospital's account anonymously. More than we'd agreed on. Enough for the best doctors, private rooms, rehabilitation. Mom never asked where it came from. Maybe she knew. Maybe she chose not to know. I started showing by April. Mom's eyes would linger on my expanding waistline, but she stayed quiet. We moved around each other carefully, like we were both made of the same glass I'd swept up that night in the coffee shop. "I'm keeping it," I told her one morning over breakfast. She set down her spoon slowly. "I know. I'm not telling him. I know that too." We looked at each other across the table, 2 women who'd learned that survival sometimes meant keeping secrets. "Your father," she began, then stopped. "No, that's your story to tell, or not tell." By June, I couldn't hide it anymore. I quit the coffee shop before they could fire me, sold everything I could, and found a job doing freelance illustration from home. Mom and I became a closed circuit. She painted, I drew, and the baby grew between us like a secret we were both keeping from the world. I moved us to Asheville in July. Mom was in remission, strong enough for the drive. We found a little house with a garden, far from Denver's snow and memories. I told the neighbors I was a widow. It was easier than the truth. Leo was born during a thunderstorm in August. The power went out just as he crowned, and he entered the world by flashlight, screaming like he already had opinions about everything. The nurse laid him on my chest, and I understood immediately why I'd made every choice that led to this moment. "He has your chin," Mom said. "But those eyes," those gray eyes, Silas's eyes. I pulled Leo closer, as if I could hide him from a truth that was written in his DNA. We built a quiet life. I started an online art business, painting custom pieces for clients who never needed to know my real name. Mom watched Leo while I worked, and he grew up thinking it was normal to have paintbrushes instead of toys, to fall asleep to the sound of pencils on paper. He drew before he could properly walk. Little scribbles at first, then shapes, then, always, dragons. Fire-breathing, wing-spreading, magnificent dragons that he'd spend hours perfecting with his little fingers wrapped around crayons. "Why dragons?" I asked him once when he was 4. "Because they're strong," he said simply, "and they protect their gold." I wondered if somewhere in his genetic memory, he knew about a father who hoarded wealth in glass towers. Or maybe all children dream of dragons. By the time he turned 8, his talent was undeniable. His art teacher, Mrs. Patterson, would send home notes. "Leo has a gift. Have you considered entering him in competitions?" I resisted, at first. Competitions meant exposure, meant people looking too closely at my beautiful boy with his distinctive eyes and his father's sharp jawline emerging more clearly every year. But Leo wanted it so badly, and I'd already taken so much from him. A father, a family history, half his heritage. Just one, I promised. A small one. Mrs. Patterson smiled. There's a wonderful children's exhibition in New York. Very prestigious, but intimate. Only the best young artists get invited. I should have said no. Should have recognized the danger in prestigious, in New York, in anything that might put us in the orbit of people like Silas Hamilton. But Leo's eyes lit up like birthday candles, and I'd spent 8 years saying no to so many things. Okay, I said. One exhibition. Mom tried to warn me. The night before we left, she sat on my bed like she used to when I was little. Some secrets have expiration dates, she said. This one doesn't. She touched my cheek gently. Oh, baby, they all do. The Met looked like a palace made of light. Leo pressed his nose against the taxi window, his breath fogging the glass. Is that whole building for art? That's right, baby. All of it? All of it. His wonder made my chest tight. This was the world I'd kept from him. Museums and grandeur and spaces where his talent belonged. We climbed the steps slowly, Leo counting each one, his small hand warm in mine. The children's exhibition was in a side wing, transformed into a wonderland of young creativity. Leo's painting, a dragon protecting a nest of golden eggs, hung in a place of honor. He'd worked on it for weeks, adding layer after layer of detail until the scales seemed to shimmer. That's mine, he breathed, pointing. I know, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. Other parents and children milled around, but Leo only had eyes for his dragon. He stood before it like a tiny guard, occasionally explaining his technique to anyone who stopped to look. I hung back, letting him have his moment, trying not to think about how much he looked like. Remarkable work. The voice hit me like cold water. I turned slowly, already knowing who I'd see. Silas Hamilton stood 3 feet away, looking exactly the same except for a few silver threads in his dark hair. He was studying Leo's painting, not me, but his knuckles were white where they gripped the exhibition program. The detail is extraordinary for someone so young, he continued, his voice carefully neutral. The artist must have an exceptional eye. He does, I managed. That's when Leo bounded over, face flushed with excitement. Did you see my dragon? I used 17 different shades of red for the fire. Silas looked down at him, and I watched the exact moment recognition struck. His face went very still, like someone had pressed pause on his expression. Leo, oblivious, kept chattering about brush techniques and color theory, using words too big for his age. What's your name? Silas asked softly. Leo Monroe. What's yours? Silas? He crouched down to Leo's level, and they were eye to eye. Same gray, same intensity. Tell me about your dragon. I wanted to grab Leo and run. Instead, I stood frozen as my son explained every scale, every shadow, every artistic choice with the same passionate precision I'd seen in videos of Silas giving business presentations. Nature versus nurture, playing out in real time. You know what's funny? Leo said suddenly. You smile like me. Mom always says I have a crooked smile, see? He demonstrated, and it was like looking at 2 versions of the same person. Yours is crooked the same way. Silas's eyes found mine over Leo's head. In them, I saw the mathematician he'd once been, adding up dates and features and the probability of coincidence. Leo, I said, voice too bright, we should look at the other paintings. But I'm talking to Mr. Silas. It's fine, Silas said, standing slowly. His face had rearranged itself into something polite and distant. I enjoyed meeting you, Leo. You're very talented. He walked away without looking at me again. I spent the rest of the exhibition in a haze, smiling and nodding while my mind screamed calculations. How long until he called, until lawyers showed up, until everything I'd built came crashing down? The call came 3 days later. Not lawyers, Silas himself. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. Eva. Just my name, but weighted with 8 years of questions. I agreed to meet him in a neutral place, a diner halfway between Asheville and his office. He was already there when I arrived. Sitting in a back booth like this was a business negotiation. Maybe for him, it was. Is he mine? No preamble, no small talk. I appreciated that. even as my hands shook around my coffee cup. Does it matter? You know it does. His voice was very quiet, very controlled. I ran the dates. The timing fits. And he looks... He stopped, jaw tight. Just tell me the truth. Yes. The word fell between us like a stone in still water. He closed his eyes, and for a moment I saw past the CEO to the man who'd told me about his sister, who'd held me afterward like I was something precious instead of purchased. 8 years, he said. You kept my son from me for 8 years. I kept him safe. From what? From me? Now anger crept in, cold and sharp. I'm not my father, Eva. I would never... I know that now. I didn't know it then. I made myself meet his eyes. You were a stranger who bought me for a night. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to give me a chance to be more than that. We sat in silence while the diner bustled around us. Finally, he pulled out his phone, showing me a photo of the sister he'd lost. Emma had the same crooked smile, the same gray eyes, the same way of tilting her head that Leo did when he concentrated. He looks like her, Silas said softly. When I saw him at the exhibition for a moment, I thought... He shook his head. It doesn't matter what I thought. What do you want? I asked. I want to know my son. I want to be part of his life. He leaned forward. And I want to do this right, without courts or custody battles or any more secrets. But secrets, I was learning, were like Leo's dragons. Once you let them out, they breathed fire everywhere. The story broke a week later. Someone at the exhibition had recognized Silas, had seen him talking to Leo, had done their own math. The headline was almost quaint in its cruelty. Billionaire's secret love child revealed. Our quiet life exploded overnight. Photographers camped outside our house. Leo's school called, concerned about the disruption. My clients canceled orders. The internet detectives dug up everything, my mother's illness, the timing of her recovery, Silas's payment to the hospital. They painted a picture of me as a gold digger who'd baby-trapped a billionaire, and nothing I said could change the narrative they'd already written. Leo didn't understand why we couldn't go to the park anymore, why kids at school whispered when he walked by, why someone had spray-painted gold digger on our fence. What's happening, Mom? He asked one night, curled against me in bed because he was too scared to sleep alone. Adult problems, I said. Nothing for you to worry about. But he was already pulling away from his art, leaving his dragons half-finished. The light in his eyes dimmed a little more each day, and I realized I'd failed at the one thing I'd tried to do, protect him. Silas filed for custody rights. Not full custody, his lawyer assured me, just formal recognition and visitation. But I knew how these things went. Rich fathers and struggling mothers. Who would any judge choose? I need a lawyer, I told Mom. She was quiet for a moment, then said, I'll call Harold. Harold was Mom's cousin, a public defender who usually handled DUIs and petty theft. He showed up in a suit that had seen better days, but his handshake was firm. We'll fight this, he promised. Money doesn't automatically win. But it felt like it did. Silas's legal team filed motion after motion. DNA tests were ordered, confirmed what everyone already knew. Social workers visited our house, taking notes on everything from Leo's bedroom to the contents of our refrigerator. The first hearing was a disaster. Silas's lawyers painted him as a devoted would-be father denied his rights. They had financial statements, character witnesses, a whole presentation about the advantages Leo would have with access to his father's resources. We had the truth, but truth looked shabby next to their PowerPoints. Supervised visitation to start, the judge ordered. We'll revisit in 3 months. Leo had to spend every Saturday at a neutral location with Silas while a social worker watched. He came home from the first visit quiet and confused. He kept asking about my dragons, Leo said, but I don't want to talk about dragons anymore. That night, I found him in his room, surrounded by torn paper. He'd destroyed every dragon he'd ever drawn, methodically ripping them into pieces too small to tape back together. Why? I asked, kneeling in the destruction. Because dragons are stupid, he said, 8 years old and already bitter. They can't protect anything. The second hearing loomed like a storm system on the radar. Harold did his best, but we both knew we were outgunned. Silas's team had hired child psychologists who testified about the importance of father figures. They'd brought in education experts who detailed the opportunities Leo would have at elite private schools. They painted a picture of a life I could never give him, tutors and travel, and every door opened by money and connection. Miss Monroe, Silas's lead attorney said during cross-examination. Isn't it true that you denied Mr. Hamilton any knowledge of his son's existence? Yes. For 8 years? Yes. Despite knowing that Mr. Hamilton had the means to provide advantages for Leo that you couldn't? Harold objected, but the damage was done. Every yes felt like another nail in my coffin. Then Mom took the stand. I'd begged her not to testify, but she'd insisted. She looked small in the witness chair, her painting clothes replaced by her one good dress. Mrs. Monroe, Harold began, can you tell us about the circumstances surrounding Leo's birth? Mom straightened her shoulders. I was dying. Eva made a choice to save my life, and her voice broke slightly. I was the one who told her not to contact Mr. Hamilton. The courtroom went very quiet. I was afraid, Mom continued. I'd seen what powerful men could do to the women they considered beneath them. I'd watched Eva's father walk away without a backward glance. I couldn't bear to see her hurt like that again. So you advised her to keep the pregnancy secret? I did. Every choice Eva made, she made from love. For me, for Leo. If anyone should be blamed, it's me. Silas's lawyer tried to shake her, but Mom held firm. She painted a picture of 2 women trying to survive, making imperfect choices in impossible circumstances. When she finally stepped down, she squeezed my hand. Truth, she whispered. It's all we have. The judge called a recess. In the hallway, Silas stood by a window, looking out at nothing. I shouldn't have approached him, but something in his posture, the same defeated slump Leo got when a drawing wasn't working, made me brave. She's right, I said. I was scared. He turned slightly. Of me? Of what you represented. Of losing him. I wrapped my arms around myself. I grew up watching my mother lose everything to a man who saw her as temporary. I couldn't let that happen to Leo. I'm not your father, Eva. I know that now, but back then, all I knew was that you could buy anything, including me. He flinched. That wasn't what He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I was trying to help. By purchasing me? By offering what I had. Money. His laugh was bitter. It's all I knew how to give. My father taught me that everything had a price, even saving the people you... He cut himself off. The people you what? But Harold was calling me back, and the moment passed. The judge's decision split the difference, shared custody, with Leo spending 3 days a week with Silas. The child needs both parents, she said, as if it were that simple. Leo took the news quietly, but that night I heard him crying in his room. When I went to check, I found him trying to tape together one of his torn dragons. I changed my mind, he said. I want them back. Oh, baby. Some things can't be fixed once they're broken. Then I'll draw new ones, different ones. He looked up at me with those gray eyes, so much older than 8. Mom, why does he want me now? Why not before? How could I explain? That love and fear could exist in the same space? That adults made mistakes that children paid for? That sometimes protecting someone meant hurting them? He didn't know, I said finally. And that's my fault. Will I have to love him? No, sweetheart. Love isn't something anyone can make you do. But I watched my son pack his overnight bag that first week, carefully folding his clothes like he was already trying to be someone else. The Leo who went to Silas's penthouse wasn't the same one who came back. He was quieter, more careful, like he was walking between 2 worlds and trying not to break either one. He has an art room, Leo told me after the 3rd visit. Just for me, with every supply you can think of. That's nice, I managed. I didn't use it. Why not? He shrugged, but I knew. Art had been ours, mine and his and Mom's. Now even that was being divided up, custody arranged. 3 months in, the careful schedule collapsed like a house of cards. Leo had stopped eating, stopped drawing entirely, stopped being the bright, curious child I'd raised. He existed in both homes without belonging to either, a ghost of himself. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I arrived to pick him up from Silas's building and found them in the lobby. Silas kneeling beside Leo, who was curled in a ball on the marble floor, sobbing. He won't tell me what's wrong, Silas said, desperation cracking his composed facade. I knelt beside my son, not caring about the staring doorman or the marble cold under my knees. Leo, baby, what happened? I don't know who I'm supposed to be. The words exploded out of him between sobs. At school, they call me the rich kid now. At his place, everyone treats me like I'm special, but I'm not. I'm just Leo, and I don't know how to be two different people. I gathered him into my arms, feeling him shake apart. Over his head, I met Silas's eyes and saw my own heartbreak reflected there. Take him home, Silas said quietly. We need to figure this out differently. That night, while Leo slept, Silas came to our house for the first time. He stood in the doorway of Leo's room, taking in the space where his son had grown up. The hand-painted mural of dragons Mom had done when Leo was born. The bookshelves built from reclaimed wood, the desk where so many dragons had been born and then destroyed. This is what I took from him, Silas said. This piece. We sat at my kitchen table, the lawyers dismissed, the pretense dropped. For the first time since that night 9 years ago, we were just two people trying to navigate an impossible situation. My father called, Silas said suddenly. He wants to meet Leo. Threatened to cut off funding to all my charitable foundations if I don't bring him to Sunday dinner. Your father who let your sister die? The same. He stared at his hands. I told him to go to hell. What did he say? That I'm weak, that I'm letting sentiment cloud judgment. That the boy, he called Leo, the boy, deserves to know his real family. Silas's voice turned bitter. As if DNA makes family. What are you going to do? What I should have done years ago. Cut ties completely. The foundations will survive without his money. He looked up at me. I won't let him near Leo. I won't let him do to our son what he did to Emma, to me. Our son. The words hung in the air like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. I've been thinking, I said slowly, about what Leo needs, not what you want or what I want, but what he actually needs. And he needs to not be torn in half. He needs stability. I swallowed hard. He needs us to stop making him choose. Silas was quiet for a long moment. What are you suggesting? I don't know. Something different. Something that doesn't require him to have two lives, two homes, two versions of himself. Eva, he's stopped painting dragons. The words came out raw. He's 8 years old, and he's given up the thing he loves most because we've made it too complicated to love anything. That's when I noticed the folder Silas had brought. He'd been clutching it since he arrived but hadn't opened it. Now he pushed it across the table. Inside were photographs. Not of Leo, but of paintings. Dragon after dragon. All different, all beautiful, all clearly painted by the same hand. I started painting them after the exhibition, Silas admitted. I needed to understand him, to understand what I'd missed. I'm not good, not like him, but... You painted these? I traced one with my finger. A dragon curled around a clutch of eggs, protective and fierce. Art therapy, my therapist called it. Turns out I'd been trying to paint Emma for years without knowing it. Then I saw Leo's work, and suddenly I was painting him too, the nephew she never got to meet. I looked at this man, this stranger who wasn't a stranger, this father who'd learned to paint dragons in the dark, and felt something shift in my chest. Show him, I said. Show Leo these. Not in your penthouse, not on a scheduled visit. Just show him. The next morning, I brought Silas to our backyard, where Leo was listlessly pushing on the swing Mom had hung from the old oak. Leo, I said, your dad has something to show you. Leo barely looked up, but Silas knelt in the grass and opened his folder, spreading the dragon paintings out like an offering. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Leo slid off the swing, drawn despite himself. You painted these? His voice was very small. I tried. They're not as good as yours. Leo studied them with the serious expression he used to wear in his art room. This one's wings are wrong. Dragon's wings attach at the shoulder blade, not the spine. Can you show me? It was such a simple question, but I watched my son war with himself. The hurt against the instinct to help, the anger against the need to create. Finally, he sat in the grass beside his father and picked up a stick. See, like this, he said, drawing in the dirt. The bones have to make sense, even in pretend things. They spent an hour there, drawing dragons in the dirt while I sat on the porch steps and tried not to cry. Mom joined me, silent support as we watched two people learn each other through art. He's trying, Mom said quietly. I know. Are you? I thought about all the walls I'd built, all the protection that had become a prison. I'm learning to. That evening, Silas was leaving when Leo tugged on his sleeve. You could. Leo stopped, started again. You could come to my art class. At school. Parents can volunteer. Silas looked at me, asking permission I realized he'd always been asking for. If you want, I said. The change wasn't instant. There were still hard days, awkward moments, the ghost of 9 years of absence. But slowly, carefully, we built something new. Not the traditional custody arrangement the court had ordered, but something messier and more real. Silas closed his father's threats by dissolving his position at the family company and starting his own nonprofit, Firewing Foundation, named for Leo's dragons. He hired artists to teach in underserved schools, funded art therapy programs, turned his guilt into something useful. Would you consider running the educational division? He asked me one evening. We were sitting on my porch while Leo showed Mom his latest dragon in the garden. You understand how art saves people. I just write checks. That's not true, I said, remembering his painted dragons. Not anymore. 6 months later, Leo had his second exhibition. Not in New York, but at our local community center, part of Firewing's first showcase. He'd been working for weeks on a special piece, refusing to let anyone see it. It's a surprise, he said, covering his work whenever we walked by. The night of the show, our small town turned out in force. Mrs. Patterson was there, Harold in his best suit, Mom in a dress covered in paint splatters she'd pretended not to notice, and Silas, standing a careful distance away, still learning how to be present without overwhelming. When they unveiled Leo's painting, I understood why he'd kept it secret. It was 3 dragons. A mother dragon, silver and strong. A father dragon, dark with kind eyes. And between them, a small dragon painted in every color imaginable, breathing not fire but light that formed a bridge between all 3. It's us, Leo explained to the crowd, his voice clear and confident. But the way we're supposed to be. People applauded, but I was watching Silas. He stood very still, one hand pressed to his chest like he was holding something in or letting something go. Later, as we cleaned up, Leo fell asleep on a bench, exhausted from excitement. Silas draped his jacket over him, then helped me stack chairs in comfortable silence. He's remarkable, Silas said. He is. You did that. You and your mother. You gave him that strength. He was always strong, like his father. We looked at each other across the empty room, and I saw not the stranger from the coffee shop or the CEO from the custody hearing, but the man who'd learned to paint dragons for a son he'd never met. Eva, he started, then stopped. From his pocket, he pulled out something that caught the light. A ring made from melted gold, reformed into something new. I know we can't go back, he said. I know I can't undo 9 years or make different choices, but maybe we could make new ones. Not for Leo, not just for him, but for us. I thought about dragons and bridges, about broken things made whole in different ways, about the kind of love that grows in the spaces between what was and what could be. We don't need official labels, I said, taking the ring but not putting it on. We just need to keep choosing each other, keep choosing Leo. Every day, he agreed. Leo stirred on the bench, mumbling about dragons in his sleep. Above his head, his painting watched over us, 3 dragons flying through a storm, leaving rainbows in their wake. We weren't a traditional family. We were something harder and more beautiful. People who'd found each other across years and mistakes and impossible choices. People who'd learned that sometimes love isn't about holding on tight, but about opening your hands and trusting what stays. Mom always said some stories don't have endings, just places where you stop telling them. This felt like that kind of place. Not an ending, but a beginning, with all of us finally flying in the same direction. Through the window, the first stars were coming out. Somewhere in the distance, I swear I could hear the sound of wings.
Sometimes love isn't about control. It's about trust, growth, and choosing each other even after the hardest choices. If you've ever had to protect someone you love by walking through fire, you know how heavy silence can be. But healing begins the moment we stop hiding. If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. And remember, family isn't just about blood. It's about who stays, who chooses you, and who learns to love you right.